Hello, my name's Sarah. This is a talk that I gave during the 2025 Dash Hackathon where we were creating poster presentations. And I just thought I'd go back and record this so that people in the future could use it to learn more about poster creation. Da, da, da. So just starting out, what is the purpose of a poster? To tell a research story. And yes, in this presentation, I use a lot of SpongeBob memes. I do not own SpongeBob. Posters are not going to be the same as a research paper or a review paper. They are a quick way to tell the world what your research is and what you've been doing in a quick way, just to sort of introduce people to your research. And I generally see it as a way to tell a story in a short amount of time. So don't get overwhelmed, but this is a breakdown of the things that you'll find in a poster. And I try to break it down into you have your book cover, which has your title, your author, and your abstract. An abstract is a really brief, like one paragraph summarizing everything in your poster. And it's kind of like the title and author and then the back of the book. And then you've got your beginning, which is your introduction, which provides your background information and the reason for your research project. Then you got your methods, which is the middle. That's kind of how you got from start to end. You have your results and your discussion and conclusion, and that's the end of your book. And then finally, you have your about the author, which is your references, acknowledgments, and contact info, because oftentimes when you're doing a poster presentation, you're hoping to get people to talk to you. Here's an example. I know this can be a little overwhelming, but copyright, by the way, to Downstate Health University, Sciences University. Thanks for letting me take this. And we're going to break this down a little bit more. So, as I said before, the beginning is the introduction, and it's your what is the need to know information. This is where you got to consider your audience. You got to consider what is the problem or question you're trying to solve and why is it important? What would be the impact of your research? A lot of people, if you're in a poster presentation, they're not going to know what it is that you're talking about because that's not what their specific research is or their specific medical specialty or any of these things. So, and you can't give somebody an entire semester's worth of background in the 5 minutes that they're staring at your poster. So you got to figure out what is the need to know information in order to understand this and how can I explain it in a concise way. For those of you who are using this while they're writing something, a good exercise is to write the goal of your research in one sentence. Try not to let it be a run-on sentence with a ton of clauses. Try to make it as simple as possible. This will be your thesis statement in your introduction. Then you have your middle, your methods. What is the journey you took to get to your data? In a research paper, your methods is going to be way complicated and it's going to have a lot of steps because you got to be really detailed. In a poster presentation, it can be a lot more simplified. Nobody has the time to read 3 pages of methods. They just want to know what you did. So this is where you can be a little more simple. And I really like to try and avoid dense text blocks. You can use figures like the ones I've got. Just make sure you also recognize any software used, any statistical methods, any copyrighted stuff. Um, Again, if you're doing this was for a workshop, but try to write a numbered list of the steps you're trying to take to complete your project and see if there's a way you can make a figure out of that or an easy explanation. Then you have your end, your results. Results are always unbiased. You're just analyzing, you're just not analyzing, you're just presenting your data. This is where figures are your friends, especially in posters, because this can lower the amount of text that you need. And of course, don't forget to mention your significance. And then your discussion, this is where you point out trends and why they may have occurred. Just a small thing I want to point out, causation is not correlation. Don't draw conclusions where there are none. This is where your language is really important. So there's significantly correlated versus X caused by Y. This is where you discuss your significance. Why do we care? Why does the person who glanced at your poster on their way to the snack table want to care about this? What could it indicate? And then what could you do next? Or what will you do next? Maybe someone will want to help you with it. And then, as I mentioned before, the abstract summarizes everything in the poster. I typically leave this to the end, then try to summarize each section that I've written out in one or two sentences. It's okay for your results in the abstract to be basic trends. And then finally, this does need to be read independently of posters. It's very common in conferences and places like that where people are not going to read the whole poster. They're just going to skim your abstract and see if it's relevant for them. So make sure that you don't need to, you can still sort of understand the greater picture just by reading the abstract. And then for your title, don't get lost in the word weeds. Keep in mind, what would you pick up as a book cover or approach as a poster? Um, Now we're going to talk about what aspects of a poster would attract you to approach. I want you to do a little mental exercise. Use your imagination. So you're at a conference, gotta have your badges and your free swag, and you're going to your poster presentation, and you see a couple posters. Which one of these two do you think you'd want to approach and why? Um, Typically, I would go for the one on the right because there's some pretty pictures and the text doesn't look overwhelming, and because I don't want to read all the text in the one on the left. It looks clear. It's got a good color scheme. The background isn't confusing. These are all things that are real. People, there's a reason graphic design is an important thing that people need to learn. Because the brain wants what the brain wants, and the brain wants things to not be difficult and to be fun. Um, so some basic guidelines to keep it lightweight. Never go below 16-point font. You should be able to read it generally from 6 to 8 feet away. Try to keep your word count below 1,000 words. Stick to 3 to 4 colors, not in like a really crazy neon color. Try to go for something that's a little more pleasing. And try to use it across all figures and designs. And do incorporate the figures. Try not to do dense text, as I've mentioned before. Make sure that you have good contrast in your colors without being distracting. This will also make it disability friendly for those who have dyslexia or things like that. I also suggest Googling dyslexic friendly fonts and things like that, and colors to use that are good for people with different types of color blindness, because that will make things more accessible as well. And then make sure your title, as I mentioned, is understandable to the average scientist or the audience that you're going to have at your poster presentation. This is from the Wisconsin University, or University of Wisconsin-Madison, I should say. I just really like it. I would pause and review this if you can, because it has a lot of really great resources. It sucks, but I recommend doing something in either, Adobe or PowerPoint. You're gonna have to make sure things are aligned and actually pay attention to the inches. Make sure that when you create your project, you put in how big it's gonna be, because otherwise the resolution is gonna get really messed up. Think about your layout, all of these things. So yeah, give this a good look. And then some giant general science writing tips. I hope you like my memes. These are, I feel like, some of the most valuable writing tips I got out of my major. Um, this might seem obvious, but this is the first thing I ask myself when I sit down to write anything. What does my audience know? What do they need to find out? I had a really great teacher in high school sort of stress this for me, not even college. Um, get your point quickly. Other than lists, try to avoid two clauses in one sentence. Um, we all love a run-on sentence, but you can't. People love writing run-on sentences, but people do not love reading run-on sentences. The first time you use an acronym, use the whole phrase. Subsequently, use the acronym. That will save you a lot of space. And then my number one statement, if someone can't understand your science writing, it's not because you're smarter than them. It's because it's bad writing. Um, I'm making a huge generalization here. I do not think most scientists are bad writers or ignore this, but I do think that a good writer will keep this in mind. Um, you know, I think a really great example of this is I would have to find it, but the paper that was published for the COVID-19 vaccine, one of the like big papers, was so readable and so understandable. I looked at it in my sophomore year of college with my class, and it was beautiful. It was, it had words that we didn't necessarily know, but it was written in such a concise way that once we looked up these words, we really understood what was going on, and we understood that it was good science. People will trust your science if they can understand and trust you. So this is a skill that you need to practice and develop. Here's some more general writing advice. People pay the most attention to the start and especially the end of a sentence. Place the important clauses there. For example, these are going to look like they're emphasizing different things. If you say snails have a lot of slime and a big shell and are really cool. Uh, I don't know about you, but I kind of just focus on the slime and the cool. And maybe if I'm thinking, I'll remember the shell. Versus if I say snails are really cool and they have a lot of slime and a big shell, the shell part is going to be more emphasized. And then, here's just something a little bit scarier. You can read that on your own, but even if you don't understand things, you're going to notice different things are emphasized based off of where they are. This is recorded, so I can't take your questions, but I hope that this helped. And otherwise, happy writing, everybody.